Today on Locked On Red Wings, what is Detroit's best case scenario and how do they get there?
You're Locked On Red Wings, your daily podcast on the Detroit Red Wings. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Red Wings podcast. We are your hosts, Brian Fisher and Scotty Bentley. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and we are available wherever you get your podcasts. And Scotty, I feel like the last two episodes we've done have been kind of pessimistic, realistic, but pessimistic. You know, this is the first season I feel like we're not excited about building and getting better. We feel maybe this team's going to stagnate a little bit this year without any of the improvements we wanted in the offseason. So we wanted to sprinkle in a little bit of optimism, and we want to talk today about what is this team's best case scenario. We'll talk about the team's best case scenario and in segment one, and then the individual best case scenarios that kind of have to occur or may have to occur for them to get to that team ceiling. But before we get to that, I got to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app right now by visiting FanDuel.com and win $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Scotty, the number one question when we talk about the best case scenario for the Red Wings in the 2025-2026 season, is about establishing what is the ceiling for this team. Because realistically speaking, it's probably not winning a Stanley Cup. So, Scotty, in your eyes, what is the team's best case scenario result for this season?
Yeah, I think you mentioned it there. It'd be really easy to just way overshoot and be like, well, yeah, best case scenario. Okay, we're trying to on the bell curve, right? We're not trying to hit the happens once in a million times, right? We're trying to find the 80 and 20th percentiles here, the things that are realistically kind of the boundaries of what could go right and what could go wrong this season. So in terms of, regular season success and what we think at least everything going right kind of looks like for this season is probably at the top of the wild card. It's probably wild card one. I think that this is a team I would love to come on here and be like, yeah, they could, win the division or catapult themselves up and be like a top three team in the division or whatever. It is such a talented division that they play in. I really think if we're talking about realistic expectations here, that if everything is kind of firing on all cylinders and we look around and go, wow, like what they did this offseason worked, or like the game plan they had going into the season worked, that probably looks like a high-end wildcard team where not only are you in the wildcard, but you're not exactly stressing the last couple of games in April either.
Right. And I'm obviously we discussed it a little bit before the show, so I'm right there lockstep with you. I just think that this team at its peak with the roster the way it's constructed can steal wild card one and maybe steal a playoff round, but I feel like that's stretching it to the extreme. I would say maybe go 6 games in the first round of the playoffs. It's just with how this team is built and the lack of the defensive depth, you're really going to be leaning on a lot of things going right with the youth and veterans having a serviceable rebound season for this team to really hit its absolute ceiling with who is there now and who is... What's that face for?
What?
Oh,
I'm listening?
You scrunched your face like I said.
Oh, sorry. No, I'm listening. I'm listening intently.
He has to try really hard to listen. He had to scrunch his face.
You would be surprised, okay?
I was like, did I say something wild? Because sometimes, my mouth just moves.
Listening. You're good.
But yeah, it's with the Florida Panthers, the Toronto Maple Leafs, and the Tampa Bay Lightning at the top of the division. I find it really hard to move into those top 3 spots. But with the talent that is on this roster, I do think that and we've talked about it, right? Even in our pessimistic Atlantic Division predictions episode, that we still feel that we're in the tier, maybe on opposite sides of the tier, but we're in the tier with Montreal and Ottawa still. So if all goes well and Ottawa and Montreal maybe come back down to earth and Detroit just hits all of the things that they've been trying to do finally works, then I can definitely see, 91 to 94 points in a best case scenario. Again, best case scenario. To get that wild card one. I know wild card one was a little bit more this last year because Ottawa played really well. But that doesn't mean it's going to be that way again this next season. So, but when we talk, Scotty, about what has to happen on the Red Wings with players and with systems and with coaches for them to achieve it, not all of these things have to hit, but at least some of these things that we're going to list off have to hit. What to you, Scotty, is like one of the biggest reasons, or the biggest reasons why the Red Wings would hit that ceiling?
Yeah, I mean, I think we can start with just we talked about this a little bit yesterday, but I think that it makes a lot of sense to highlight the core again, and that's going to be something that obviously is very not only important, but kind of vital for the Wings' success. I think at this point, Larkin's been around long enough. We kind of know what he is, but I think that when it comes to Seider and Raymond, if they truly can unlock either another level, if they can unlock even another level, then I think that would, Captain Obvious statement, go a long way. I think that with those two, you're kind of just hoping, okay, they're still young. Everybody, thinks the world of them, and they're obviously two of the best players on the team. If they can progress to even, we talked about, Raymond eclipsing 90 points or Seider being, like a Norris candidate or vote getter like we talked about last week. If those things end up happening, especially if they both end up happening, then this team certainly will be in the playoff mix, assuming a couple other things that we talk about today go their way as well.
Right, and we talked I want to go back to the Larkin thing in a second, too, because you mentioned something, and I want to add to the Larkin conversation. But with Raymond and Seider, they're still in those final couple years of their development window where they could continue to take steps forward. I don't know how much more of a step forward they could take. They could break through and suddenly become these superstars. I think Raymond, in a best-case scenario, touches 90 points. I think he can do that. He was on a 90-point pace all last season. Up until the Four Nations face-off where he got hurt and he was sluggish the second half of the season. Moritz Seider, we've seen him touch 50 points in the past. If Moritz Seider can just do what he did last year, but add a couple more extra points on, then that would be huge for the Red Wings hitting that peak. Those two guys are almost easy to say just because they are such huge pieces of the team, and it feels realistic for them to take those steps forward because they're on that trajectory. But when it comes to Larkin, right, you said we're at a point now with Larkin that we kind of know what he is. I would say that Larkin still belongs in this tier, not because of development, but because of health. Every single year, at some point during the season, Larkin gets hurt and he battles through something. And his production on the ice suffers because of it. Part of this best case scenario is Larkin stays healthy. If Larkin stays healthy, this is a guy who is 85 points, right? We've seen him be over a point per game in an injury-shortened season where he played, I think it was 69 points in 68 games played. We've seen him at 79 points and just flirt with 80 points every single year. He's got, 4 straight seasons now of 30-plus goals. If Larkin stays healthy, that is part of the best case scenario here. We know what he is, but we haven't seen it through a full 82. So it's if you get full 82 of Larkin being Larkin, that is part of the best case scenario, in my opinion. So I lump him in with Raymond and Seider to a different degree, right? We're talking about maintaining health, where with Seider and Raymond, we're talking about taking another step forward in their development. But those three, when you're talking about your best case scenario, they're a huge chunk, and I think they're almost if those situations go right, are easily predictable chunk as well. I think that those can easily happen if Larkin stays healthy and they just continue on this trajectory path for Raymond and Seider, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Health is obviously a big piece, but as you kind of alluded to there as well, just being surrounded by better talent is going to make you
Right.
better if you share a line with, Raymond, who would be in the 90-point range. So, yeah, I think that those are that's really kind of where I want to start, just because that is, they're going to
Right
be the engine of this thing going forward, obviously.
Scotty, when we go to segment 2, we're going to talk about a couple other really big factors that are going to play into whether or not the Red Wings hit their ceiling for this best case scenario episode. A couple guys we've talked about the Red Wings need to see leaps from. So we'll talk about that in segment 2 of Locked On Red Wings. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there is Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or on your phone. Monarch is built for people with busy lives. If you've put off organizing your finances, Monarch is for you. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization for your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. Don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That is 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONNHL. Scotty, I think the next two, I would argue the biggest factors in Red Wings hitting their best case scenario is two guys we've talked about a lot. Two guys going into their second full seasons in the NHL, Marco Kasper and Seider and Edvinsson. We saw so much good from those two guys last season, especially Marco Kasper after he was thrust onto the top line after Todd McLellan took over. If those two guys take a leap forward in their development, solidifying and kind of settling into those flashes that we saw last year as an everyday consistent player, those two players are going to go so far into making sure this Red Wings team hits their ceiling. If was it almost a 60-point pace for Marco Kasper under Todd McLellan last year? If he plays 50 points next season across 82, they have their 2C. That is 2C production. If Seider and Edvinsson, just maintains how good he was through the first 3 quarters of the season, through all 82, doesn't have that fatigue at the end of the season. And he'll have fatigue. Everyone has fatigue at the end of the season, but it doesn't hit him the way it did in his first full season because he's got that NHL experience and he knows how to play the game now. Then that's going to go so far for the Red Wings being a wild card team, be hitting that ceiling and hitting that best case scenario. I think as easy as it is to name those core pieces in Larkin, Raymond, and Seider, I think it's just as easy to name Marco Kasper and Seider and Edvinsson as blossoming core pieces. And if they hit their skill ceiling, that's going to help the Red Wings hit their ceiling.
Yeah, and obviously this is something that you can kind of dissect long-term and short-term, right? It's really easy for us to say if the Wings want to be good and reach their highest potential this year, that Marco Kasper and Seider and Edvinsson need to take steps forward and be really productive. But the Red Wings are also banking on that long term. They are, right? This whole thing is kind of built around the core they already have in place and adding Edvinsson and Kasper to it for the long haul. So, yeah, I think that goes kind of a lot deeper than even just this season and is very important for the Detroit Red Wings organization in terms of, what this group can accomplish in the years ahead of this one even. But yeah, certainly, just because this year's the first year that you talk about that, right? Last year was get your legs under you, get used to the NHL speed and the NHL game. It's their first full seasons in the NHL. This year is, okay, you've adjusted, now take that leap forward. And so you're hoping that happens sooner rather than later. And if it does, then yeah, certainly it could be one of the big reasons why the Red Wings are, sitting in the wild card at the end of the season.
Right. And I think we should note this too, Scotty, because we haven't mentioned their names yet. But I think when it comes to DeBrincat and Kane, we need them to just be DeBrincat and Kane. We don't need more out of them than we got last season. If they can do exactly what they did, they were not part of the problem. They were part of what was going well for the Red Wings. Well, Kane struggled early, but definitely found his footing. If Kane can just not start slow, that'll be fine. But those two guys, if they can just be themselves, they're going to be just fine with this best case scenario. I don't expect more out of them than what we got. Maybe 40 goals instead of 39 for DeBrincat. But
like that's, when we're talking best
one
case
goal.
scenario, right? You're talking best case scenario, like this team can achieve its best case scenario with Cat and Kane doing what they did under, I almost just said loaned McClellan a year ago, right? Like that can be the production of this team being its best self.
Yes, being them for sure. Scotty, what's next?
We're just talking about how the Wings can truly be their best selves. Okay,
something that we all should aspire to be.
Exactly. I think that, we might as well just make the rounds here. The elephant in the room is that this team is going to desperately need John Gibson to be like, I don't want to say like prime John Gibson. They can make the playoffs and certainly be a wild card team without him being, like peak Gibson from 6 years ago now already. But I think that it's safe to say they are not going anywhere fast if they do not take that step forward that we are hoping for in net. And that is going to start and end with the guy that, assuming health, is going to get a majority of the appearances this season.
Yeah, I said it when we talked about Gibson last week and when we talked about the player preview with Gibson. It's going to come down to, can he give you slightly better than average across 47 games? Can he be 905 save percentage across 47 games, which sounds really low, but guys, that is where goaltending is at these days. Goaltending across the league is pretty putrid, save a few guys. So 905 save percentage is solid for where they, and of course, the average could go up. So if the average goes up to 905, then I want him to be 908. Can he be a better than average goalie across 47 games and have Cam Talbot be serviceable 1B in that span where he doesn't play? Like, then yes, that'll go a long way. Also be good on the penalty kill, because as I established yesterday when talking about the penalty kill, Gibson and Talbot were two of the worst goalies by save percentage on the penalty kill last year for a team that did not get penalized a ton. So that is a different factor, but is still very much relevant. But yeah, Gibson is the elephant in the room. Like that's your biggest upgrade this last offseason, is acquiring him. If he can be the upgrade, then that's going to help you be your best self. I like that as a phrasing. The Red Wings' best selves.
I don't think I do, but I'm glad one of us does. Yeah.
Another obvious one, I'll just throw it out there. We talked about it a lot yesterday with the Todd McClellan. PK got to be better.
Yeah,
your power play, I don't expect to stay fourth best in the league, but if it can float in the top half of the league, and if your penalty kill can get back to the middle of the league, then that'll be you probably missed the playoffs with as many holes as this team has. You probably don't miss the playoffs if your penalty kill is like 20th, but it was 31st.
Maybe if it was like 25th, they make
right.
That's.
You barely missed.
What we're talking about here. Yeah, that one, I'm not even sure that justifies a big long conversation. That one is pretty painfully obvious if you follow the team in any capacity last season, that they need to not have one of the worst penalty kills I've literally ever laid my eyes on this year if they want to be a postseason team. Yeah,
especially because we talked about it yesterday at length.
Right.
Scotty, let's head to break number 2. And when we return, we'll wrap up with a couple of other notes. Big notes, though. So stay tuned to segment 3 of Locked On Red Wings. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. You're going to love using FanDuel because it fits however you like to bet, player props, building a same-game parlay, or even jumping in live as the action unfolds. It makes every game more exciting, whether you're watching your team or just keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup. It's quick, It's easy, and it's the best way to add a little bit more energy to your Sundays. So, are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app right now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. Scotty, I have vets rebounding as a big one for the Wings. You know, one thing Yzerman has done really well is draft and develop youth. And those are the big pieces that this team is going to need on the top end to perform well to reach their peak. But at the same time, if the veterans that Yzerman did sign, and that's been his biggest flaw, can't rebound into being serviceable players, then this team's going to fall short. You can only have your best players out there for so long. If your Andrew Kops can't rebound, and we saw flashes that he could. If JT Compher can't rebound, who had a good first year with the Red Wings but then did nothing last season. If Ben Sherratt can't, I don't want to say a rebound, if he can't be serviceable, you know. Eric Gustafsson, another big piece. If he can rebound and be a huge player on your second power play line. Like, you need these veterans who you signed through free agency to be able to contribute at a serviceable level. And if they can do that, if some of those guys can do that, then that'll help the Red Wings tremendously, because you can only depend on your best players to do so much. You need secondary help too. And last year they got no secondary help.
Right, and I think that that's a really important difference between the team 2 years ago that missed the postseason by, a goal that Philly allowed in the third period there, and this last season's team, right? Depth scoring was something that the team 2 years ago that almost made the playoffs had in bunches. They just outscored all of their problems. They were effective enough on the power play, and they were extremely, I don't want to say they were metrically very good at 5-on-5, but again, they outscored their problems. They had guys like Perron, right, who were getting, like depth scoring options, even though he wasn't providing too much else at that point. Like, they had a lot of players kind of that caliber, and that all went away. And the hope was last season that all went away so that you could improve defensively. Unfortunately, that all went away, and they got no better defensively. You could even argue, I think they may have gotten worse defensively and let all of those goals kind of walk out the door. So, yeah, that is a huge reason why Red Wings teams that have made playoff pushes in recent years had really solidified depth scoring. And last year, that completely kind of went away. So I think that that's absolutely a big thing. And it's more than just like put the puck in the back of the net. There's Andrew Kopp. We know his role, probably not going to fill the stat sheet, but if he can be good defensively and in the face-off circle, Comfort, similar conversation. But like, can Berggren finally take like somewhat of a step forward? There's still Elmer Soderblom. We talk about all the time, right? What is his production going to look like? There's a lot of room still to grow in the point production department in that bottom six of the forward group for sure.
Yeah, and I wonder too, like, where does Danielson and Mazur fit into this conversation? Are they part of this best case scenario that we're talking about? I think Mazur's not a lock to make the team, but he's pretty close to being a lock. I'm looking at the roster, and I'm like, there's a couple guys I could easily see him beating out for a roster spot. I think he'd be a good add to the bottom six. Can Danielson prove it? Like, if Danielson's on this team, I think that is a huge upgrade to your secondary scoring, and maybe even the top, not top scoring. He's not going to be a top scorer, but he wouldn't be part of the top of the lineup, so he wouldn't be part of secondary scoring. Like, can they be part of that best case scenario? I think they can be. Would I bank on that? Mazur, I would. Danielson, I wouldn't know if I'd call that a realistic best case scenario, but I think that there is a reality where it could happen, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and we talk about that. We've talked about that really all summer. It's just kind of like, they're not going to give Danielson an opportunity unless he's going to have playing time. And so I think that it's one thing to say, like, we all want him here and we all want him developing, but it's more than that. If the number one interest or goal of the team this year is NHL success, playoffs at the NHL level, then Danielson needs to do a lot more than just like make the team. It then turns into he needs to make the team and produce at wherever he's going to find himself in the lineup card. So yeah, I think that they'll obviously be careful with it. They've been super careful with everybody kind of so far in terms of when to call them up and when their development cycle is and whatnot. But I do think that it's the Wings can be a wild card team without Danielson necessarily taking that leap, but it sure would help a whole heck of a lot just because, again, we mentioned the depth scoring and the depth talent level on this team. If he's not only playing, but producing at the clip that is being bestowed upon him or that people believe he can, then that would certainly go a long, long way.
Yeah, and so at the end of the day, I want to loop back to where we began, and that not all of these things have to hit for the Wings to hit their team best case scenario. But some of these things and most of these things going right would go a long way. What I want to ask you now here as we wrap up the show is, what do you think are the most important elements of the things we listed that have to hit for the Red Wings to hit their ceiling this season? I have two in my mind that I think are the biggest things the Red Wings need. You have two too? You can go first. What do you think are the two biggest things that need to hit that we listed for the Red Wings at their ceiling?
Yeah, I don't want to put the weight of the world on one man's shoulders, but this is not happening without Gibson playing well. I think that is almost self-explanatory. Like that is of the utmost importance. I guess maybe it's like if you want to give a little bit of wiggle room there, you can say just anybody like playing at that caliber, right? But like we kind of know what it is at this point, and we know that it's going to have to be Gibson, and he, assuming health, he's going to get most of the playing time. So I think that kind of almost goes without saying. That's the number one on my list, at least.
Yeah, that was the same for me. Gibson, goaltending is going to be a make or break for this team. If they can get semi-consistent good goaltending, then they'll be in position to do something. It's last season, well, Cam Talbot, like every season with every new goalie we bring in, last season Cam Talbot started phenomenal, stole some games, but once the wheels fell off because they wore him into the ground, they couldn't get a save from any of the goalies, be it Husso, be it Lyon, be it Talbot, be it Mrazek. Like, it was just rough go of it. So if we can get goaltending that is semi-consistent and above average, then the Red Wings will have an opportunity. My number two, Scotty, is probably the same as yours. We'll see. Penalty kill. The penalty kill can't be almost dead last in the league. Like, that's so obvious. It stares out to you. If this team's going to hit the ceiling, you got to have a better than league worst penalty kill. Like, it's how it's got to be.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't disagree. That actually wasn't my number two, believe it or not. But it is.
Show me your number two, Scotty.
It is going to be, you know what I mean? Like, it is going to be impossible with if the kill truly is as bad as it was last season. No, my second one was that the bounce back from like veterans. I think, you know what, like we, assuming health,
that's fair.
We know what we're getting out of the core pieces, right? We know what we're going to get, even if they don't take a leap forward, if they just repeat last season, when it comes to Cat and Kane and Larkin, Raymond, Seider, we get just repeats of last year and they stay healthy. This team can be a playoff team with that level of production.
Right.
This team can't be a solidified, high-end wildcard playoff team if all of the veteran free agent acquisitions they've made in the last 3 years all just completely, really like continue to fall off a cliff and don't produce at all, like most of them have over the last few years. Like Vlad Tarasenko was like the big signing of last summer, how quickly we forget. And so I think
hindsight's 2020 on that one.
For sure. I think that is something to me, like they are going to need JT Compher to look more like he did in year one. They're going to need Alex Kopp to look more like he did. He was fine in his role last year, but like,
who did you just say?
Andrew Kopp? JT Compher?
I thought you said Alex Kopp. And I could have imagined that because of the Tigers pitcher.
Yeah. I just did a whole segment on him yesterday. So that could be a thing. I might have, honestly, I might have. Andrew Kopp, JT Compher, obviously you're going to need somewhat close to top pair production from Ben Sherratt. You want Gustafsson to solidify himself as a bottom four defenseman. Like, there's a lot, dude. There's a lot of guys on this team that have just not lived up to what they're being paid or their expectation that was given to them when pen hit paper. And I find it really hard to believe that this team can reach its full potential without those guys being a lot closer to that.
Yeah, and I think it's easy to list those things, and you mentioned it there, as bigger reasons why the Red Wings won't hit their best case scenario unless these things go right, because I have so much more confidence in Larkin, Seider, Raymond, Kasper, and Edvinsson to continue on this trajectory, or in Larkin's case, like if he stays healthy, what he will be. Like, obviously, those guys are, without a doubt, like 75% of if you're going to have a good season. If those guys have bad years, you're not making the playoffs. But I'm also confident that they'll be fine. It's those question marks in net, question marks on special teams, and question marks down the lineup that are really going to be indicative of whether or not this team makes the playoffs or not. So I lockstep with you right there, man. I think those are probably the top three biggest things that have to go right for the Red Wings to reach their best case scenario of what we believe could be a wild card one team if a couple of things just go right. Scotty, any final thoughts?
We ball.
We do ball. We'll be back with a new episode tomorrow. Stay tuned for that. Same time, same place. It's your team every day.
Every day.